Hi, I'm Patrick Hare, author of Corporate Boilerplate Vinegar. I guess you could say I came into poetry a long time ago when I was in college. When I was supposed to be taking notes in classroom, I would write funny little poems or draw pictures or make small paragraphs. I would make fun of the professors sometimes because they would tend to ramble on just continuously and they would go off on all these weird topics. Like one of the first poems that I wrote was where I was comparing the professor to the Wizard of Oz, except instead of the wizard saying, "Go get the broomstick of the Wicked Witch," I had him say that and then give this long-winded story that really went nowhere and then ended, "Oh, and you got to get that broom." So it was sort of, just, I don't know, kind of mocking the authority figures and the professors, and people started passing my stuff around in the classroom, and that's when I knew, well, this is a little bit better than the average stuff that people are drawing and doodling.
You were making fun of your professors with your poetry?
Yes, which is the wrong thing to do in college. So I would also do parodies of, sections of the books, or, you'd sometimes get like a history of the poet or a history of a movement in early America or something like that. So I would create my own little blurb that just mocked that and had the most ridiculous stuff in there.
What would you describe as the purpose of your writing?
I would say the purpose of my writing is both to make people laugh and then also to vent at the things that bother me. Sometimes you can't say what you want to say when you're talking to somebody, or that you're in a situation where you just have to push forward and sort of swallow your pride and do what you're doing, or you can't make a scene in a public place. But later on, if something is getting to me or bugging me, I'd write it down. And so there's a lot of pieces where it's just some small frustration in life where you're waiting in line someplace and people are acting kind of weird, and you want to say something right then, but you can't. It just makes everybody else's life harder. But you can also come back and just write about it. So there was one time I was on my lunch break at work, and I managed to write a poem about trying to find a greeting card for a girl that I liked, and I couldn't. So I thought, this is really aggravating me, because they have greeting cards about, dead pets and everything like that, but I can't find a, "Hey, I like you, here's a greeting card." What makes me sit and write things down is that kind of aggravation, but it is sort of, would an audience want to hear this? I have plenty of pieces where I write things down, or I write down fragments of work that I know no audience is going to hear it. I just have to write it to get it off my chest and to get through the rest of my day. I want to still be able to think, but I know, okay, I've written it down, I've kind of compartmentalized it, and then whether or not an audience is going to want to read it is a separate thing. But when you're going to poetry readings, and especially poetry slams that are competitive, you want to put something out there that people can identify with, and then for me, it's people can laugh at.
Sir, everyone standing behind you in the checkout line would like to know if you're going to give $1 for breast cancer research. Come on, you can just put it on your card. It's easy. Press yes on the payment screen. You already slid the card and we know who you are, Patrick. It's not like you have to spend a minute looking at cancer patients or 3 days walking, you mamophobe. Hey everybody! Mr. Hare can afford top-end vegetables and fancy craft beers, but he never tosses a buck to the honored veterans who make his spendthrift ways possible. He's like some kind of checkout chicken hawk who turns his back on American heroes. And watch! He buys water in bottles, but doesn't seem to think a village in Darfur would have any use for a well. Someone's gonna die in the desert tonight because Patrick Hare either can't see the color green or he wants to keep a couple more decimal points in his bank accounts. What kind of scum can pony up $4 for Mint Milano cookies when sick children suffer in St. Jude Hospital? Ask Patrick. And what brand of ice cream does Mr. Hare buy? If he bought Ben & Jerry's, we could at least give him a pass for supporting Vermont dairy farmers. But I don't know how he can stomach dry as French vanilla if every spoonful tastes like the blood on his hands.
The process itself can be very chaotic. Sometimes when I get an idea, I'm in my car or I'm at work, and so I can only write part of something before I get interrupted. My ideal process, I would say, is if I'm by myself in a quiet place, I write something out. I have to read it out loud while I'm walking around, and so I'll have a pen in my hand. And so then usually, I have to stand next to the wall and hold up the piece and cross something out and write something down and then try rereading it. So I want to get sort of a feel and a rhythm just by walking, and also a lot of my pieces are meant to be heard. And so I want to make sure that I have the timing of the piece, that the words don't trip over the tongue. Sometimes you don't know you're writing a tongue twister until you read it out loud. By the time I have gone through 3 or 4 times of reading it out loud, crossing things out, rereading it, then I have a piece of paper that's just got a bunch of scribbles all over it, things that are crossed out. That might be the point where I commit it to, whenever I can, I open up the laptop and I'm just able to sit there and type it and then reread it. Any one of those pieces has probably been gone over 50 times just to make sure that it sounds good, I can get the idea out, and sometimes there's just pieces in there or lines that don't make sense, or they're dull, or they seem flat. They just don't go with the rest of it, and they get crossed out. Of course, I try to put as much drama into it as I can. If I can reproduce the mood of when I scribbled down something on that Post-it pad, that's where the best writing comes from. It's trying to get into that frame of mind. I would never compare myself to a method actor, but there is something of a method in putting yourself there, saying things out loud, trying different stuff, writing it down, saying it again, and finally at the end I've got something that I feel that I can present to an audience.
So do you sometimes feel like you're living a double life, living out your creativity and then also working your day job?
Definitely. It is 2 different things, and the problem with when you have coworkers that know about your poetry, I had an instance quite some time ago where I did tell the coworkers about the poetry, and they came out, and the way the coworkers behaved was so strange and bizarre that it made the poets unhappy. People at work didn't know they were a couple, so they were doing some really flirty things with each other at the reading and distracting other poets. She was basically grinding on him while other people were reading poems, and these were my coworkers, so I was just embarrassed. And then, of course, the coworkers come back, oh, Patrick's great. And of course, then all of a sudden, I'm like the poet laureate, and I have to read a poem in front of the entire workplace. Then they say, oh, Patrick, you got to hear Patrick's stuff. That one about the dogs is weird. It's like, no, I didn't do the one about the dogs. But so essentially the next time they had an employee meeting, that's where I had to get up and read one of my poems. And so it was kind of a lot of pressure because the work persona and the poetry persona are 2 different aspects of who I am. And the poetry persona at least has the freedom of, if I'm up on stage for 3 minutes, I'm not like that all the time. You have to put a lot of yourself out there, and there's a lot higher energy level being the guy on stage. One of the coworkers, who was the owner's daughter, asked me if I had written the poem myself. And when I said I had, she goes, nah. It's like, well, that's really nice. I guess it's a compliment if she thinks it's so good that I couldn't possibly have written it. But it was my poem.
So Patrick, what are we going to find in your book, Corporate Boilerplate Vinegar?
In the book, you get 25 years of the awkwardness of my life. And the reason for the title Corporate Boilerplate Vinegar, as a matter of fact, is because in my day job, I am writing a lot of non-creative things. I'm ghostwriting things. I'm writing press releases, at least at the time that a lot of this came out. I was writing about 2,000 words a day of just stuff that a search engine would want to read, but a person wouldn't. I would do articles written for the CEO or a manager, And so they'd have the manager's name on it, but everything was written by me. Or it would just be things like user manuals. So that's the whole idea of it being boilerplate, is you don't have a lot of freedom. And the title comes from a poem where I'm essentially distilling my talent, which should be like a fine wine, into a vinegar, which, is not a fine wine.
What do you have cooking on your boiler this time?
About 7 years ago, I was between jobs and I had a job interview. And the first person who gave the interview is two-person interview. First person gave the interview and asked all the nice questions, and this seemed like a home run. Then this other guy comes in the room and he goes, well, looking at your resume here, you seem like kind of a job hopper. I was like, well, maybe. The last job I had, I skipped for 6 years. But I thought, I have hopped around in a lot of jobs, and I've seen a lot of interesting stuff in all those jobs. I've worked in fast food and factories and offices. The concept of all the odd things that I've done in my jobs, I'm essentially trying to anthologize little pieces from those jobs. For example, one day at one of my jobs, we had an employee die. We weren't allowed to tell the customers he was dead until they renewed. So I was essentially covering up the death of an employee until all the customers had renewed their contracts. Not many people are asked to cover up somebody's death, but that was what we were asked to do. Going through all the types of jobs that I've had, there's always been some strange thing happening or something unusual that other people might want to read about. So I'm trying to develop that into a book that goes through the history of all that.